What I'm going to give you today is it's a Carter dual action pump. Fits a 69 AMC AMX with a 390. It's a dual action vacuum and fuel. This particular one, normally the part number for the 69 390 would be a 4657. This one here has 40788 stamped into it, which tells me that it's a later production. Another giveaway is right in this area here. Is usually stamped Carter, and what a rebuilder will do is they'll grind that out of there because it's I don't know for what reason, but they mill it out so that you can't read the word Carter anymore, and if you can't tell it's a Carter pump, no, you shouldn't have it. Anyway, let's get going. We're going to rebuild it, see what everything looks like after 50 years in service. My first order of business is to clamp it in a vise using one of those ears, one of the mounting ears. There's no need to mark the location of the orientation for this because it only goes back on one way. Remove these 3 screws. Be careful with the last one. This is a hell of a spring underneath this, and I'll show you in a second. You'll see it start to pick up after I take this screw out. Here's the spring, and the dirty old gasket. Now this spring gets compressed down about another ½ an inch, so it's a tremendous amount of pressure on it. And you got to remember, when right now this diaphragm is in the down position. When the arm goes down, and normally that would come up, it gets even shorter by another ½ an inch. Just to give you an idea of what kind of pressure this thing is under. That's the extent of the vacuum diaphragm. Just a rubber O-ring right around the outside here. Down inside here there's a couple of valves, and if I can get my rag out of here, I'll wipe out some of the grease that's in here. Oh, I shouldn't say grease, it's oil. Now we want to remove these 2 valves. Get a pretty substantial screwdriver. Put it down inside, catch the top of that mushroom, and just pry it out. And this is half of the valve. There's still another piece to go. Just drive through this. Come off to the side, and you'll pull it out. That's the rest of the valve. You need to get both pieces out of there. Now down underneath, Carter felt necessary to put a screen in here. I don't know why. Let's see if I can get this other valve out without it breaking in half. That's the complete valve. You get some people that'll take off just that mushroom part and then call me up and say, hey, you sent me the wrong kit. The valves are wrong. Well, once you finish taking out all the pieces, you'll realize that the valves are right, and you haven't finished your job. That's it for the vacuum side. We want to flip it over. Again, grab it by one of the ears, only because it's a lot easier and sturdier to deal with it while it's clamped in this position. Now this is the part we want to mark how these ports are in relation to the bottom part, so that it goes on the exact same way, goes back on the exact same way that it came off. So you want to mark, you want to mark 3 pieces. The location for this in relation to this, and this in relation to the body. Scribe a mark across it, stamp a couple of dots in it, take a picture of it, draw a picture of it, do whatever you have to so that it goes back the same way. Now we get 6 screws. You can remove all 6 screws. You don't have to hold off on the last one because the spring is underneath the diaphragm as opposed to the other side, which was on top. Now, 99% of the time this is stuck down. Putty knife in between the 2 pieces of casting, a few taps. Alright, 7 taps. And that's what it looks like underneath. Water has been sitting in here. That's not good. That's the reason why I couldn't move the thing earlier. These are your inlet and outlet valves. You want to remove these 2 screws. Again, you need a pretty hefty screwdriver. And I've found many times when I see water like this, or rust, that these screws just won't come out. And I end up drilling them out. Or they break off and you have to drill it. Use the easy out to get the rest of the screw out. This isn't the case. Once those 2 screws are out, just pry this up. And we got more interesting things underneath here. I have no idea what that is. This is what they call this, a pulsator diaphragm. And fuel will come in. It was in this hole, into this area, goes down through this one, into this chamber where the diaphragm is. When the diaphragm comes up, it pushes the fuel out here, and the fuel goes out that little hole and out here up to your carburetor. So this is interesting. It's just sludge from bad gas. Let's see if I can dump it out of my hand. We got a little bit of everything in there. Rust, dried up fuel, Now a lot of times what I'll find, if a pump is, it's, people will get these pumps out of a junkyard where the vehicle's been sitting for a number of years, or even sitting in their yard for a number of years, not running, not having anything go through it, and bees will climb in through here. They'll climb in through the inlet. Once they climb in through the outlet, they have all this area here to make a nice nest. And when they do it through the inlet, they fill up this area. I can't tell you how many times I've taken it apart, taken a pump apart and have there be bees in there, or spiders. Okay, in order to get these valves out, this is the top half of it. You want to get an 1/8 inch punch and just start tapping down through here. Just constantly tapping. Make sure you stay in the middle of that and you'll knock the valve out. This thing wasn't passing any gas, so to speak. Now with that pressed into the casting, it only allows that valve to open up, what, 1/16 of an inch? It opens up that much. Wait till you see how much our valves open up. Anyway, this is the valve seat area. As you can see, it's just loaded with rust and corrosion. We'll fix it up though. Now we want to take, in order to get this diaphragm out, we have to get the pin out that's behind here. In order to get this out, we got to remove this soft plug. Before you do that, you got to take this spring out of the way. Be careful because it'll take off. And there's a few instances, which not on this one here, but usually these pins, we've got a slot right in the middle, and there's a hairpin clip that snaps in there. It's there in the event that this plug falls out, that the pin doesn't fall out. And I'll show you how hard it is to get these pins out, which might explain why there's no clip in there. Take a chisel, go on either side of it, just work it back and forth, and it'll work its way up. That's the soft plug. Here's an area where a lot of people get in trouble. This pin from Carter is pressed into this housing. In order to get it out, normally on a regular single action or a lot of the dual action, you can just go in, grab it with a pair of vice grips and slide it right out. These don't do that. I have a punch. Support the bottom, the other half of this, support this. It takes quite a bit. I go as far as I can with that particular punch. Then I have, I think it used to be a Allen wrench. before it comes out, we'll give it one last little hit. If you don't support this on this particular side, you'll end up breaking the casting. I've come across many of them that'll come in and the customers say, you rebuild it for me. I like the way what you do comes out better. But they don't tell me that they've already cracked the casting across here, and it usually breaks it inside of here too. Be careful with it. Support it. Now in order to get this arm out, we got to push down, take some of the pressure off it, because it won't come out right at the moment. Take some of the pressure off, and it just slides right out. That's the fork that it's going in, and it's sitting right in here. These ones here have got a pretty hefty spring on it. I'm sure it's because of the demand that the engine has. There's one more plug to take out, right behind here. Get your chisel again. Usually it doesn't take much to do these. This one comes out pretty easily. It's a little shorter. Anyway, what we'll do is we're gonna wash this up a little bit in the chemical bath to get all the grease and the oil out of there. And now it's gonna take a trip with the glass beater. And this is what your diaphragm looks like after 50 years in service. It's hard as a rock, and it wouldn't pump any more fuel. Now we're going to get the valves out of this vacuum section. And the way that I do it is we get a punch down through the hole, knock them down. Very easy to come out. And again, there's that screen for filtering the air. Okay, after a little cleanup on this one here too, it'll be ready for the glass beater. And the last piece to take apart is what they call the vacuum diaphragm. And surprisingly, this sits down inside, not surprisingly, but this sits down inside, and the arm hits up against it to push it up and down. That big spring pushes it down, and the arm pushes it back up. And underneath here, at the bottom of it, there's the bottom of the pull rod. Surprisingly, this is still here, but there's just like a little rubber bumper there. And it sits right there. So when this arm is doing its thing, it's actually running up against something that's not as hard as the pull rod is. Anyway, we got to get this apart. Simple thing to do. Clamp it so that the shaft doesn't move. Loosen the nut. Take it right off. Separate the top and the bottom. Here's your seal for the vacuum side, and the second plate. And that rubber sits right in that groove. Make sure that this washer goes back on. You can stick these plates back together and just get the nut caught. Then we'll be back to that after everything gets cleaned up, bead blasted, clear coated, and all the surfaces flattened out. Be back shortly. Now that everything's all cleaned up, make sure that this area is nice and flat. Running over a belt sander, run a file across it. Everywhere that there's things are going to mate, the gasket, diaphragm, the other half of the gasket on the vacuum side, the little pulsator area. Just make sure everything is nice and flat. Take a piece of sandpaper, set it on a nice flat surface, and just keep, well, this you couldn't do that because of this casting sticks up, but you can go off the edge and just keep rubbing the thing back and forth, rubbing around. You'll eventually end up with a nice flat surface. It's the only way it's going to seal. I'll put the valves in for the fuel section first. Now our valves come in 3 pieces. There's a rivet, a spring, conical spring. Set that over it, and then set the valve plate right on top. There's no this side or that side, it doesn't matter. Now remember when I showed you the original valve, how much it moved? Well, this goes in about 3/16 of an inch. This is the amount of area that this will open up. So you'll flow a lot more fuel. Pressure will be the same, or better, because you're getting a new spring. Put the rivet in so it gets just sort of gets stuck in the hole. Make sure it's in that center hole, and then just tap it down. And you want it to come through about 1/16 of an inch, about like that. And still, you've got, it's kind of hard to tell, but you've got quite a bit of room to flow a lot of fuel. Got the other valve. Don't reuse that mushroom that you took out. Do the right thing, replace all these parts. Now notice we have an opening and then it's blocked. The blocked part has got to cover up this because we want the fuel to come up, run into this diaphragm, and go out through the out. This is important. If you put it on this way, the pump won't work, because it's going to try to pull, it's going to try to force air in, and it is going to run right into this, so the fuel is going to run into that. We wanted the fuel to go down through that hole. Find your reference marks, or look at this, and you'll see that this is opening here. It's got to coincide with that. Line up the 2 holes, put these 2 screws in. As soon as I remember what I did with them. Okay then. Let's take a break for a second. Okay, I found it. You can do this a couple of different ways. Put the screws up through and in through the diaphragm. It'll hold it. It's just a smidgen smaller. And that's about this much. It's funny, I'm not used to doing it that way. But it worked. Bring one down so that it touches, and then bring the other one down and give it a twist. You want these to be good and tight. It was a quick test to make sure that this is sealed all the way around and you got everything in there right. You should be able to blow air in and not suck air out. You should be able to suck air out and not blow it in. Because this is the outlet, that's the inlet. And that'll tell you that the valves are seated right and they're all sealed, and you got a good seal around here. So there's shouldn't be any problems with any leakage or anything. You can put the valves in the body part. You notice it's nice and clean now, by the way. Same thing with this. Remember all that? Couldn't even tell you where it was now. I think it was all over in here. All that rust that was in there, and the corrosion, it's all gone. It's one of the advantages of using glass beads. Alright, the valves that you're going to get for the vacuum, they're going to look like this. This would have been the cage side. This goes down inside. You want something that's going to drive it, that's going to sit along this edge, and I think a 3/4 socket maybe. I've never even tried it. Anyway, I made a tool for it. Set that valve down inside with the rivet up. Usually 4 or 5 good hits will knock it in. Don't try to drive it down too far, because it won't go that way. The other side, same thing with this side. Just drive it down until it stops, or it's flush, just below flush. It's probably it's again a smidgen under, but it's down there and it's not going anywhere. Flip it over and we'll put the new diaphragm assembly with the new seal. Now the old one, the seal up here was like a cone shape that came down a little further. Actually, it stood up a little higher, but it's that type of a seal sealed in around this inside edge. And there's not much room in there. You have to depend on, there's no variations in the edge, because it sits right on the edge of this. Or our seal, we seat down against this nice flat surface. No chance of any leaks unless you put it together wrong. You want the arm? I'm going to push this down so that the pull rod gets exposed inside, and stab it, and it'll hold it. your new pin. This is the slot that I was telling you about earlier. You're not going to use it in this application, but just take some of the pressure off, move the arm around while you're pushing in on the pin, and it'll slide right in. Soft plug, couple of good whacks, we'll drive that in. We want to replace the spring, and that's this one. Be careful because it's pretty tough. It's a pretty strong spring. Yep. I'm going to use a different screwdriver. The only job for that spring is to keep the arm, or this little slider, in contact with the cam lobe. It has nothing to do with spring pressure. That's that orange spring underneath here. That takes care of that. This has nothing to do with flow or spring pressure or anything, or fuel pressure. While you got it here, supported by that, drive in this extra soft plug. And we're going to put valves in the vacuum side. Make sure it's good and supported. And just like the other side, this is the side that had the cage, that mushroom part on the top. You can tell the seat area is down. If you look in here, the seat is down further than this one here. This one's, yeah, 1/4 of an inch down. And this is going to be probably a 1/2 inch down. What that tells you is this valve has got to go this way. The other one goes the other way. Get your driver and just be careful with this because you're only holding out here. You hit this too hard, you're going to snap the ears off it. This side goes down just so that it's flush. Now we're going to put the fuel casting together, or the fuel side together. Now remember your reference marks? I told you how this went back together. One of the reasons that I say make a mark on it and not just try to depend on your memory, you might get this apart and find that there's a broken spring that you have to reorder, or there's a broken piece in here that didn't come in a kit, which there's a lot of stuff that doesn't come in a kit, like the arm, springs, anyway. If you find something that's broken, you're going to have to put it aside, and it's going to be a little while before it comes back in. And chances of you remembering, man, some people are pretty good, but not everybody can remember exactly how it went. Life gets in the way, anything can happen. Just mark it. It only takes a second to do it. You want to put 2 screws in, one opposite each other, go through the diaphragm and into the casting, and run it about halfway down. Just get them caught. Put in the rest of the springs, the rest of the screws, and again just run them halfway down. Don't tighten them all the way up. Again, don't tighten them down all the way. As you can see, this still a little loose. Now these particular type of pumps that have this slide on the arm, be very careful because it's only bronze and it can break. But anyway, you want to get, I use an adjustable wrench. You want to put it on there just to give you some leverage, because you're going to have to hold this up here for a little bit. Your arm will get tired. Anyway, hold this all the way up till it stops. While it's up in that position, tighten down at least 4 of these screws opposite each other. By doing this, you're preloading the diaphragm, making it so that it'll live a long and fruitful life. It helps stretch, it keeps the diaphragm from stretching and prematurely wearing out. Once you got at least 4 of them down, you can release the pressure and tighten down the other 2. Or tighten them all down at the same time. Take one trip around after everything's tight, just to make sure you didn't miss one. Now to check and make sure that we got a good seal around here, put it back on your arm, hold your finger over the inlet and try to pull that up, that arm. Once the arm is up, hold your finger over the outlet and release it, and you'll feel pressure there. If it drops real quick, start looking for a leak. Spray some water on it and give it a try. Otherwise, this one here is all set. If you got fittings, you can put them in there now while it's upside down or right side up, as the case may be. Now, I don't advise putting motor oil around in this area. What I use is some white grease, because after a while that'll go away. Just run a real thin coat around the inside. Okay, we want to assemble what's considered a vacuum diaphragm. This O-ring, leave this kind of loose so you can fit it in between the 2 plates and just run it around. And make sure it goes inside like that. I like to put some real thin coat of white grease on this, just to, we don't want it to run dry. Now with this, just finger tight. Run that down and just slowly work this around. What usually works for me is I just start tapping. Make sure it's loose enough so that it goes inside. put a little pressure on it. See how it lifted it up? Just start tightening up that nut. And if you remember, I showed you the bottom of that with the little rubber piece. It sits in this slot in the arm, keeps it from spinning. You don't want to crank that nut down too tight. Just enough to keep it from going anywhere. Put the spring on. Put the gasket on. This is why I tell you it'll only go on one way. See these two holes? There's two holes over there. And just like the other side, we're going to put two screws in opposite each other. And now you got to fight with this spring. You see how far away it is. We're going to check it. So the next time I'll know that it's 3/4 of an inch. You got to compress that. Keep in mind that diaphragm is down. It's going to come up that 1/2 inch. So you can imagine the pressure that it's under. Get it caught. Run it down a little bit. Using the screwdriver, set the other one in. You can run these down. 3/4 of the way for that matter. And tighten up. I think in the kit we give you 2 of these gaskets. You can put them both on if you want, but I don't think I've ever put on 2 gaskets. If you don't flatten out that surface, you might need to use 2 gaskets. If you can't get to a belt sander or a file or something, you might need to use that second gasket. Otherwise, it's ready. Put a gasket on the front. Hook up your vacuum lines. Pay attention to what it says. Right in here it says wiper. This is the line that's going to run up to your wiper motor. This one here goes, it says MAN, it goes to the manifold. Intake manifold, wipers. This pump's ready. Ready to go back to the customer. All brand new again. See this area where they machined out the word Carter? I don't have another one here right offhand to show you what I'm talking about. But anyway, you want to order a kit, go by the number that's stamped on the flange. It'll either be a 4-digit number with a letter in the front and the back, or just a 4-digit number with a letter at the back. A lot of times they'll have an MO number in here. I don't think this style pump uses that, but sometimes there's a casting number, and all that will do is identify this portion of the pump. It won't tell me what's in the bottom, the 2 pieces. In any event, like I said, this is ready to go. If you want to get in touch with us, 781-335-8860, or on the web at then-now.com. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget the notification bell. Any questions, any comments, leave it down below. And that brings this one to an end. Thanks for watching. Be safe out there.